Okay. All right. Welcome, everyone, to our very first Facebook Live event, as I mentioned before. So I apologize if we don't have everything worked out, but we do know what we want to share with you today. We're really glad that you're here. And yeah. I am Cheryl Leutjen. I'm the author of Love Earth Now, and I'm very excited to introduce you to a very good friend of mine who's just published her own book. Sibylle, 20 years ago when we met, something like that. Did you ever imagine that we'd be sitting here as two published authors having a conversation?
Not in my wildest dreams.
Nor mine. So it's really a treat to be able to share our journey with you. And I'd like to tell you a little bit more about my friend Sibylle. Sibylle Westbrook was born and raised in Germany. She holds a BA in language arts, and she's worked as a freelance translator and interpreter for many years with assignments all over Europe. Since moving to California to marry her husband, she has raised her family, taught German to young children, worked in avant-garde fashion, and pursued philanthropic interests. Her love of animals led her to travel to Madagascar in 2019. The unexpected encounter with Lemur Brigitte touched her so profoundly that she felt compelled to share her story. She currently resides in Los Angeles with her husband, children, and 2 cats. I also want to mention that her ebook is now available on Amazon. Welcome, Sibylle.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this nice introduction, Cheryl. And it is my great honor and pleasure to introduce my friend Cheryl to you. Cheryl draws her inspiration from her previous professions as a geologist, an environmental law attorney, a spiritual practitioner, and a mother. Well, that's not really a profession, but it is maybe the toughest job you'll ever have. Yes, and you can never retire from it either.
That's true.
She currently serves on the board of directors of the nonprofit organization Northeast Trees, bringing nature back to nature-poor communities all around Los Angeles County. Originally from Kansas City, Missouri, she now lives in Los Angeles with her family. And she is also a published author. Her book, Love Earth Now, I have a copy right here, won the 2018 Silver Nautilus Award. Congratulations on that, Cheryl.
Well, thank
you. And it is also available on Amazon and with your local booksellers.
Yes. Thank you very much for that introduction. And I know we have a lot of Lemur fans with us today, or plan to watch the recording if they couldn't be here. I know that a lot of people have contacted me and excited to hear a lot about lemurs, so we're going to jump right into that. Sibylle, would you share from your book?
Yes, we have technical problems showing pictures and photos, so I'm just going to share a couple of pages, maybe my favorite ones, and to show you how beautiful the illustrations are in this book.
The illustrations I want to add were done by Chloe Spencer. They are truly beautiful, I think very engaging for young children and adults alike.
This is probably my favorite page.
Maybe if you get close. Yeah, it's hard to see, but they are beautiful.
And then, of course, the picture where it compares, where it shows the real Brigitte, and I have more pictures of her. I have some more pictures of her later.
Well, Sibylle, how did you get interested in lemurs?
I pretty much started loving lemurs the minute I became aware of them. They were just such cute and adorable creatures. But the more I learned about them, and then especially when I went on my trip to Madagascar to see them in the wild, and when I started becoming more involved with the nonprofit organization Lemur Love, I discovered very fascinating facts about them. So can I share some of them?
Sure, of course, please.
So I narrowed it down to, even though there are many more, but I narrowed it down to 7 amazing facts about these lovely creatures. So number 1, I think most people are aware that lemurs live in Madagascar, on the big island of Madagascar and the smaller surrounding islands.
And that's the only place they live.
But that is the only place that they live. They cannot be found anywhere else in the wild, only in captivity.
Mhm.
So that's a very fascinating fact about them. Number two, I mean, most people, when you hear the word lemurs, if they know at all what that is, think of ring-tailed lemurs, lemur catas. They're probably the most famous representative of their species. But did you know that there are, in fact, 113
No.
different
Seriously?
lemur species?
I'm-
Yes.
I mean, ringtail is the only one I knew. I probably thought there were variations. I had no idea that there were that many.
Yeah, there are that many, and there probably will be more because they're constantly discovering new species as
Wow.
well. So they are, like I said, 113, and they range in size from the tiny mouse lemurs that are, as their name suggests, the size
That
of mice.
small?
That
Wow.
small. They're very hard to
That's crazy.
see in the wild.
Yes.
They're also nocturnal, so very difficult to see. To the biggest one, that is the Indri, I would say, and don't quote me on that, but I would say they're about the size of a chimpanzee. They are the biggest, and most lemur species in between are about the size of a house cat.
Hmm.
And then, you know, some specific facts. I have a picture here of a couple of species that I want to share some facts with. There is a shifak right here. This is a shifak.
Really beautiful colors.
Yes, there's different shifak species, and they're mostly known because they have such odd movement. They move in an upright position, bouncing on their hind legs. It almost looks like they have springs in their legs.
Like kangaroos?
Yes, but they jump up, and then they can even do a side hop. It's really funny to watch. And then I want to share. I have a picture here that I personally took of an Indri, the largest species. And they're mostly known for their haunting and eerie call. When the forest wakes up to that call, it's just an experience like no other. It will be with you forever. So, and as I already mentioned, some lemurs are nocturnal, some are diurnal, meaning they are awake during the day, and their name comes from the Latin lemurus, meaning ghost or spirit of the dead. And this is because in Madagascar, the Malagasy people refer to them as ghosts of the forest, which the poet in me loves. I love ghosts of the forest because of their night activity, because of their big eyes, and because of their eerie sounds.
I had no idea.
Really, really beautiful. I don't know, as somebody who loves language, that is just something that touches me. And then three more facts. One is they are an indicator species, and if you don't know what that means, it means that how well they're doing in the wild, their status in the wild gives us clues about how other species are doing as well. Oh, the wind here. And also how the environment that they live in general is doing. So very important. They're also a female-dominated species, which is very rare among mammals.
Sure.
And this is especially astounding as in lemurs, as with bonobos too. They're the only two species that I'm aware where this is happening, that they're female-dominated, but the females are not physically bigger or stronger than the males. So this is a really interesting and exciting topic of research to find out how that female dominance came about and how it is maintained.
Interesting. I had no idea.
Yeah, I know. It's a really fascinating fact. And then last but not least, I want to mention that they're very smart animals and very social animals. So the smartness you can see, their intelligence you can see when you read my book. And it still amazes me and touches me so profoundly that this animal, that this little lemur, was able in such a short time to copy Eric's behavior as a tour guide so perfectly. I mean, really, that she was able to copy that behavior at all. I've never seen that before, and I've never heard about any other animal doing that. So they're very smart, and they're very social. They live in family structures called troops. They have close bonds, and these two facts are one of the major reasons, obviously, why they do not make good pets, because they want to live with their families and be enriched by that environment.
So those are all fascinating facts, but the worrying truth is that they're endangered, aren't they?
They are. Unfortunately, their situation in the wild is dire. I think 94% of them have a somewhat endangered status, whether it's critically endangered, or vulnerable/threatened. The situation is dire, and there are three major reasons why lemurs are probably the most endangered mammal there is. Number one is their geographical location. As you can imagine, they are on an island, so anything really bad that happens on that island, they have nowhere to move to. They have,
It's a pretty big island, right?
It is a pretty big island, and of course, they can migrate within the island to some extent, but they pretty soon they reach borders. It's not like on the mainland where migration can happen throughout countries.
Sure.
Yeah, and then number two is that they are experiencing very volatile weather events. In Madagascar, they have cyclones, they have droughts, and these are devastating events, not only for animals but for humans. And when it's devastating for humans, it compounds.
So is this a natural occurrence, or is it getting worse because of climate change kind of thing?
It's a natural occurrence, but it is getting worse. So I would say it is both. It is both. And then number three is that Madagascar is one of the poorest countries on Earth. Unfortunately, and it has it deals with a population explosion. They have 28 million about now, and it's expected to double again by 2050, and they already don't have enough to feed the 28 million. Also, about 40% of the population is under 15 years of age, which means there's a high fertility rate, and that is not good news for lemurs.
So a lot of challenges.
Yes. The major challenge in all, what threatens them the most, is loss of habitat.
That's a problem all the way around the world.
It is. So in the case of Madagascar, the island has lost 80% of its original forest, and only 12% are covered with primary forest now, and that is devastating because 90% of the native species, including lemurs, depend on the forest. They either live in it or otherwise depend on it. And unfortunately, due to this deforestation, as you have already mentioned, climate events, weather events have gotten more frequent and more severe, which drives poverty, which drives more deforestation, which drives more poverty in the end. So it's a vicious cycle. Yeah, and other threats to lemurs are poaching and the lemur pet trade, which are both illegal, but both happening.
I just can't imagine someone wanting to take a wild animal as a pet. That's just astonishing me. And yet I know it happens. I know it happens.
Yeah. It's not a good thing. So I wanted to ask you, Cheryl, do you think that sometimes we get overwhelmed by the big picture when we think of this? Looking at the facts that we just discussed, and thus fail to see all the little opportunities that perhaps we have to make a difference?
Absolutely. I get so depressed when I hear news about, this is just one species that we're talking about here today, and it's, dire circumstances for species all over the planet, and biodiversity as we know it is threatened, and we need biodiversity for our own kind to survive, for our children to survive. So, yes, I feel that every day. In fact, that's what inspired me to write this. It's really a collection of my own stories about how to come back into believing that the small things that we do truly matter, because otherwise I just don't get out of bed in the morning, because what can I do about big corporations or, billionaires funding, terribly environmentally degrading projects, So I have to believe that what we do matters. In fact, I'm just going to share this little passage for you from my book while we're on this subject of believing that the small things we do matter. Though it be trite to say there are no accidents, I'm convinced that we are guided to know what to do if we are willing to ask, to look, to listen, and learn. Everything we do matters. All that is born of our love, hope, caring, intuition, faith, imagination, and plain old wishing for something better matters to Earth, to our beloveds, to our communities, to nature, to our own hearts, like glazed donuts matter to Homer Simpson. Even if, like Trevor, that young humanitarian in the movie Pay It Forward, we have no clue how or when or to how many our contributions do matter. Surely your recipe, your how-to manual, or divine intuition to navigate the pitfalls of this earth-loving differs from mine. Surely we have different roadblocks to hurdle. However we navigate the minefields, I honor the place where each of us stands, for it is holy ground. I commend us for caring, for crying, for exploring, for showing up right where we are, brave, earth-loving souls. We came here to play full out with everything on the line.
Oh, that's so beautiful, Cheryl.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Oh, what an inspiration. Another inspiration that I draw is from this quote from the late Archbishop of Brazil, Dom Helder Camara. A world in which only one human being, and I would add one animal, suffers less is a better world. How do you think this quote may guide us?
Well, again, that goes back to what I have to believe. It reminds me of that story, probably apocryphal, about the little boy saving starfish on the beach, and this man walks by and says, you can never save them all. There's so many starfish, you can never save them all. And then what you're doing doesn't even matter. And the little boy says it matters to this one, And so I keep that in my heart. It's like,
Yes.
Okay, I can't keep all the straws out of the ocean, but by carrying mine or refusing plastic straws, maybe I can keep it out of the nose of one sea turtle. That
Right,
gives me
and
some
one
kind of
sea
hope.
turtle matters.
One sea turtle matters. Is that what inspired your school lunch program?
Yes, in fact, it is. And for the longest time, I postponed, even though this was an idea I had and wanted to do, and I was not able to do it because I was really overwhelmed and paralyzed by the big picture because I couldn't see a way of feeding 400 children, which is about the amount of children that attend this school. And then one day it just occurred to me that every single one mattered. And if I can only feed 10, then at least those 10 children eat lunch that day. And it does make a difference to those 10 children. So that was the drive of founding this program late last year at that time.
What school is this?
It's a small school called La Marmaille. It's a private school in southwestern Madagascar, which is one of the poorest regions in an already very poor country. And just to give you a little background, the majority of the children there only eat one meal a day in good times, and that's dinner at home. So they do not get to eat at all during the day, during their school day, and in bad times they don't even get that.
And this school, I think you were telling me, offers conservation classes where...
Right. So you might ask, why did I pick this school?
Right.
Apart from the fact that it happened to be the school that I visited on my trip, and we have been able to establish a really good relationship with the fantastic director of that school. Here's a picture. I don't know if you can see it at all.
There you go, yeah.
Of us in the classroom back in July 2019. The major reason is it's a private school, so meaning it doesn't have to adhere to the French curriculum that the public schools in Madagascar
French
unfortunately.
curriculum?
Yes, it's an unfortunate relic of colonialism that public schools in Madagascar teach a French curriculum, meaning they don't teach about Malagasy culture or Malagasy endemic flora and fauna, and that in a country that is so rich in endemic species.
Tragic.
So La Marmaille, on the other hand, has an extensive environmental and conservation curriculum. I have watched lessons and I have seen lesson plans. And they also located really closely to the Lemur Rescue Center for ring-tailed lemurs, and they take frequent field trips there, so they do get an environmental education.
Nice. That's very nice. Well, is there other good news for lemurs?
Yes, there is good news for lemurs in the fact that there are many organizations that are dedicated to the survival of lemurs. There is Lemur Love, as I have mentioned, that I'm a proud volunteer of. It's a small organization, but very powerful, with Malagasy women on the board.
Nice. Very good.
There's also the Lemur Conservation Network, there's the Lemur Conservation Foundation, there's Duke Lemur Center, and World Wildlife Fund also works in Madagascar. For example, they fund a permanent research team which is close to Lemur Love's field site at a big national park in the southwest, and they consistently, regularly monitor human activity there, and they also follow 3 different troops of ring-tailed lemurs.
I love it.
And Lemur Love, for example, just for this year, for 2021, they have received a grant from the Tusk Trust. Tusk Trust, that's a difficult word,
Yeah.
to fund salaries for rangers in 4 different regions in Madagascar. And, there's lots of projects like that going on.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And then apart from that, I think the other good news, hopefully, will be, once this pandemic is over, that ecotourism can flourish again. Ecotourism has its downfalls too. It's might not be the solution for every area and for everything, but I think for a country like Madagascar that is so rich in native flora and fauna, it is a solution because it offers a lot of jobs to a very poor population that needs jobs, not just the tour guides. And we even had an animal spotter, didn't even know that was a job. And drivers, people who work in hotels and restaurants, everybody in the transportation industry, gifts, people being able to sell their crafts, and all these. What's even better is that all these jobs that are created depend explicitly on the preservation and protection of the forest.
Yes, that's important.
So that's why I think this is a solution.
I also want to mention that you're donating 100% of the proceeds, and I don't mean net proceeds. I mean
everything.
Every penny that's received from the sale of your book, you're donating back.
Yes.
To Lemur Conservation.
Yes, I am not even trying to make my expenditure back. No, every single that's what I did, and every penny that I earn, either from the sale of my ebook or from the hardcovers, will go back to either the lunch program at La Mamai or Lemur Love. But in the end, they're the same. It's the same thing. It will benefit conservation.
I know. I sent the book to my little young cousin, and she just was fascinated. She just sat on the ground, and immediately it was just wrapped in by the beautiful illustrations by Chloe Spencer. Again, I want to mention.
Yes. So maybe people want to know is there something that they can do for lemurs, apart from obviously supporting the organizations that I named, either by donating or volunteering in some form or shape, or by possibly engaging in ecotourism. But is there something that a regular person in the US that can't or doesn't want to travel and maybe doesn't have a lot of money, what they can do?
Sure. I'm not an expert on the problems facing lemurs, but I know something about habitat loss around the world in general, and some general things that we can do at home is, number 1, eat more plants and less meat. There's a lot of deforestation occurs to have enough land for raising large animals for hamburgers and pork chops, and even more for all the food that those animals need to eat. Acres upon acres for corn and soy. A World Wildlife Fund study found that a staggering 60% of global biodiversity loss is down to the food we eat. So that's a sobering statistic, isn't it?
It is.
They suggest eating more plants, eating a variety of foods, wasting less food. I know that's a big issue.
I know. I read somewhere that 40% of all of our food gets wasted.
And I know I'm really trying to do a better job of that at my own kitchen. Moderate meat consumption, and also buy food that meets a credible standard, they call it. I think of the example like palm oil. You may have heard about the horrors of palm oil,
or tuna, that you avoid, buying tuna that is caught in traps
Well, tuna, at least we know when we're buying it. Palm oil is in so many things. It's in
I know, that's
pizza, donuts, chocolate, deodorant, shampoo,
Wow.
toothpaste, lipstick. It's really, I was surprised when I went to look it up, and yet it is a major driver of deforestation of some of the world's most
Yep.
biodiverse forests, destroying the habitat of already endangered species like you may have heard
Yeah.
orangutans. It's a big
Yeah.
pygmy elephants and also the Sumatran rhino. So that's not to say that all palm oil is as bad as others. You know, if you don't want to give up your Nutella, reach out and discover, find out what Nutella or Girl Scouts of America are doing about the palm oil in their products. Some of them
Yeah.
are doing good things and some of them are not. And if they're
Yeah.
not, let
Yeah.
them know how you
Just,
feel about that.
right. Or just stop buying it.
Right. Right.
Because in the end,
Exactly.
the pocketbook dictates a
Vote
lot.
with your vote with your wallet.
Yep.
And if you want to do something closer to home or something more hands-on, you can create habitat in your own space. If you have a backyard, add native plants, plant milkweed for monarch butterflies, plants that attract pollinators. The National Wildlife Federation offers guidelines to become a certified wildlife habitat. I know people here in the city of Los Angeles who have done this, so it's possible even where you are if you have the space, as long as you're including things like food, water, some cover, places to raise young. Or if you don't have a backyard, work with your community, your city, your neighborhood to establish wildlife corridors or space, um, or adding native plants to parks. I know our local little city hall here was, just mowed over grass until one of our community members talked to the city. You have this program about helping people replace turf grass with native plants. Why aren't we doing it here? And that came to happen. So it can
It
be
can.
just one conversation. May probably take several with the city, but but it can start with just one person making a phone call.
That's true. That kind of reminds me of another quote, again from the late Archbishop Dom Helder Camara, that is very meaningful to me. When we are dreaming alone, it is only a dream. When we are dreaming with others, it is the beginning of reality.
Yes, it's so much better to when you don't feel like you're all alone. I know I used to carry a reusable straw a long time before it became acceptable or even known that that was a thing, and it felt strange and unusual, and my kids were embarrassed, and I was just like, I'm looking for one thing that I can do, and it ended up causing so much conversations and people coming up to me, and just that one little thing, although it felt lonely at the time, turned into some meaningful actions by other people, and then I didn't feel so alone. I felt like, okay, this really is maybe making a small difference.
Yeah, that is true. And that's what I've learned too. While we need the big picture to inform and inspire us, we need to really start very small, and really no deed is too small.
Right. Let's see. Okay. We wanted to ask questions, but I'm just going to be honest and say, oh, here we go. Here they are. I found the comments. This is our first Facebook Live. So, are there any questions? Please type them in the comment box.
Yes, and before and while people are doing that, and while maybe you are checking on that, I did want to mention that
Please do.
there is a very close connection between humanitarian aid and conservation, in case you're wondering how this lunch program
Yes.
benefits lemurs. So I can tell you very directly that the kids that go to the school and receive lunch every day, that obviously there's an obvious benefit that they're not hungry. And if you watch a video, which you can watch on my Facebook page, of 100 children happily eating a bowl of rice and beans, the value of that is self-evident. But it means obviously that they can much better focus and learn in school. And then there's an added benefit that the retention rate is much higher in a school that feeds a free lunch, because normally in hard times in a poor country like Madagascar, people pull their kids out of school. But now when they offer a free lunch, they want the children to continue to go to school, because it's one worry less. right? The child
Mm-hmm.
gets fed. And so in the end, these children will turn into adults that are much more likely to want to protect their national treasure. And they're also much more likely to be in a position to do so as they have access to a greater variety of jobs and possibly even to higher education.
And even when they're young, they're going home and telling mom and dad what they learned at school that day too.
Yes, they make a difference. Every child makes a difference. And I just wanted to say that the children of Madagascar, they will be the stewards of their environment, and their future and the future of lemurs in Madagascar are inextricably intertwined. Everything you do for a child in Madagascar, you also do for a lemur in Madagascar.
That's a beautiful thought. That's really beautiful.
And in general, they really are one and the same thing. Biodiversity cannot flourish anywhere if humans are suffering.
All right, I have just one question because I'm the kind of person when I pick up a book I just finished a book called Homer's Odyssey about this adorable blind cat. I'm always concerned when I pick up a book like that if it's going to have a tearjerker ending. Can you tell us if Brigitte is alive and well?
As far as I know.
Okay, good.
Yes. I can tell you, I mean, I obviously, I called the book based on a true story because there are parts of it that I experienced myself, but there are parts of it that were told to us through the tour guide who only spoke Malagasy, and then our tour guide whose English was good but not that great.
Yeah.
So some things might have gotten lost in translation. But
Brigitte is a real lemur.
She is a real lemur, and our tour guide kept in touch with Eric afterwards, and one day she texted me from Madagascar, "Oh, Brigitte has a baby." So that is news that I got half a year after returning from Madagascar.
Oh.
Of course, Eric, being a poor Malagasy guy, doesn't have a phone with which you can take pictures, so there are no pictures of the baby, but that is a true fact.
That's fascinating. All right, well, I think we're about to come to our close here. Do you have any final thoughts?
I don't know. I would just like to encourage people to never think that anything you do is too small. Never, you are not powerless. And, you might think what you do is just a drop in the bucket. But what if all those drops in the bucket unite? Right. And then we have a sea. And ultimately, any sea is just composed of trillions and trillions of drops.
Absolutely. I do encourage you to check out Sibylle's beautiful book on Amazon. The ebook is available, and as well as Love Earth Now. And in fact, I'm just going to make yes, it's adorable. And if you are wondering, looking for more guidance and discovering what you can do or what's your call to do, because so many problems, none of us can take them all on or even take on, a fraction of them. If you're wondering how to discover exactly what is your personal call to action, I have a 5-day program that will be available starting on Earth Day. It is free. It's a series of 5 emails with just a couple of, a short, very short, not much time out of your day, short reading, and a couple of suggested activities, and designed to evoke what your own heart and soul wants you to know. Because that's what I believe makes for most inspired action, is when you're passionate about something and when you feel like this is what my heart, my soul call for me to do. And it's much easier to show up and do weird things like carrying a straw when no one else does, if your heart's in it.
Exactly. Yeah. That's very important. And I think by way of closing, I will share a couple of pictures that I took of Brigitte.
Please do.
If the wind allows it.
There.
I don't know.
The camera's up here, so. Yeah, there you go.
So this is Brigitte looking back, making sure her tour is catching up. And this is her leading the tour with Eric walking right behind her.
Move it up a little bit, I think we can see her. Yep, there she is. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And if you're joining the video later, we are glad to have had you with us as well. And Happy Earth Day, everyone. I hope you have a beautiful week.
Thank you for the idea of the webinar, Cheryl, and I hope everybody enjoyed it. And let us know what you thought in the comments, and if you have any questions later, still put it in the comments. We might just answer.
Yes.
Happy
Yes,
Earth Day,
happy Earth
everyone.
Day.